So you may have heard recently, I know I've heard from several sources, mostly booksellers, publishers, people who really want this to be true, that ebook adoption has plateaued, that ebook sales rates are stuck around 30%. We're going to have a report from Author Earnings in February that will debunk that number. The ebook adoption rate is much higher than 30%. They're not including self-published works. Which, if you look at bestseller lists on Amazon, which is the #1 seller for ebooks, you're not looking at a trivial sample size. Just looking at the bestseller list shows how many books aren't being included in those reports. It's also when I talk about publishing, it's usually my bias as a fiction author, talking about novels, and a lot of the industry really were. When you see stories in magazines and newspapers talking about publishing, they usually go and interview novelists. Fiction and nonfiction are really two separate things. Both are going to have rosy futures, but they'll be very different from one another, I think. And for fiction, ebook sales is probably closer to 70% right now. There's a reason I think this adoption rate is so high, and there's a reason I think it'll go even higher. I'm very curious about this question. I had been for years, even before my writing career took off. When I was a bookseller, I spent a lot of time observing people in airports, on airplanes, as I walked down the aisles, just noticing what people are reading and how they're reading. I would talk to people and ask them how they're enjoying that device, what book they're reading, how much they're enjoying it, how much they read. That's all, informal sampling. It's anecdote. I don't know. We can't learn as much from that as we can from hard data, but I think they support one another. So we'll have the data soon in an Author Earnings report. I wanted to talk about my experiences talking to people about how they read. Some of the things I've noticed. It's older readers who are adopting e-readers, not younger readers. I think there's a couple of reasons for this. You'll notice a lot of my ideas for what's happening here are based on psychology. I think that's why I think most of the economy is based on psychology. So I'm going to talk about things that seem a little wishy-washy probably, but I think they're very important. There's an easy reason that young readers prefer books over digital readers, and that's that they don't have credit cards to have their own accounts and purchase ebooks from Amazon and other online retailers. But I think there's an even stronger reason, and I say this as someone who was part of this crowd. When you're young, the physical things you adorn yourself with define you, and being considered a reader is something that was important to me when I was young. It's something I did a lot, and then adults and people praised me for it, which made me want to do it more. I think this is how a lot of personalities are hardened when we're young. You show aptitude, and then you receive praise, and then you want to do that thing even more, so you get better at it. You show more aptitude, you receive more praise. That's sort of a positive reinforcement cycle. So being seen with a book, and when I was young, it wasn't the popular thing to do. Now it's getting more and more popular. We're seeing a lot of films come from book adaptations. Having read the book first becomes kind of a cool thing. That even the people who don't read because they don't enjoy it, I think, look up more to readers than they probably did in my generation. So it really is an age where being seen with a book is kind of not only a way of signaling to your peers, this is who I am. If you have similar interests, come talk to me. We have this thing in common. It's our way of in-grouping and out-grouping. But it really is becoming more of a status symbol, and I don't think we'll ever break that. And I don't think we should try to. I think it's natural. I think it's cool. Older readers as well. So I noticed when I would poll, I remember specific conversations in restaurants and airports with the older readers, and being surprised to see that this was the demographic that was adopting e-readers. And one of the most common response I got was the ability to make the text bigger. So as a bookseller, I knew we didn't always get large print editions. Not every book sells enough copies to warrant that. But now every book someone bought is a large print edition. And I've noticed even, I'm pushing 40 now, but I've picked up books in bookstores, and to save on on print cost and just bulk. Some of the nonfiction books I've picked up, I've put them down simply because the text is too small. I look at it and say, "There's no way I can read that." That's never stopped me from buying an ebook. So that's an observation that I've seen from older readers, and the weight. I read a lot of nonfiction. I should have had more books for to display, but a lot of big hardbacks, thick books that are very heavy. And reading them in bed, older readers were saying that it was tiresome for them, that they just couldn't do it anymore. So there are those reasons. But there are so many more psychological reasons that I don't think we fully appreciate. One of the biggest to me is the lack of clutter. So, and it's not because we don't want to have books everywhere. I mean, my wife and I have lived in houses just surrounded by thousands of books, wall-to-wall bookshelves everywhere. We've pared down as we've moved into smaller and smaller homes and prepared to move back aboard boats. But what an unread book on your bedside table does, and a stack of them, is it removes you from the book buying market. And with e-readers, when you do not finish reading a book, it kind of slides into the background of your the listing of your books in your dashboard or your home screen. So they're not staring you in your face and reminding you that you have these unread books you've already bought, and you shouldn't buy a new book until you finish these. I did have that guilt when my bedside table was stacked up with books. If I bought a couple of books in a row that didn't enthrall me, just their presence kept me from buying another book. That doesn't happen with ebooks. Again, this is one of the reasons that I think, and we've had Amazon tout that when people buy an e-reader, they buy 4 times as many books or something like that, including more print books. As a result, I think these are some of the reasons that we're seeing that. It's psychological stuff like that. Why am I telling you all this? I'm curious about these things. I don't know if anyone else is. This isn't. I'm not going to try to convince anyone to adopt digital reading. I wish we had more. I wish we heard more from readers. Just video after video of why you're reading print books, why you're reading digital, why you read some of both, and how you make that decision. We need that information. And yeah, it is anecdote, but you gather enough of it, and you start to see a clearer picture, especially when you combine it with the data. When you see the trends, and then you hear a handful of people explain the decisions that they're making, it can help explain what you're seeing in that data. So what I thought I would do is talk a little bit about the transition that I've made as what I would consider a digital immigrant, and how it's changed my reading habits, why I've made these decisions, how it's affected my life. As an author, maybe it'll help you understand what other readers' decisions are like. Maybe people will share their accounts and say, no, I've had a completely different experience. This is what I'm seeing. And maybe, more readers will chime in and will understand the market more. So what I thought I'd do is show you what I would kind of travel with as a reader prior to this migration. I call myself a digital migrant or digital immigrant. Digital natives are the people who were born comfortable with computers and devices and screens. They're going to have a completely different kind of adoption rate than those of us who are not digital natives. I'm right on the cusp. My sister is very close to being a digital native, and we're just 2 years apart. But I learned to type on a mechanical typewriter in high school. I got a smartphone very late in life. I had a pay-as-you-go phone into 2002 or 3 that just stayed in my my glove box for emergencies. I think I got my first smartphone just about 7 years ago. So I'm really new to all of this, and I was very resistant to change. I am a book lover, a bookseller, just since I was a kid. I mean, Amber and I have owned thousands of books. And when I used to travel, when I used to go on any kind of a trip, I carried a stack like this plus a newspaper. I mean, this was a couple of magazines, a couple of books, because I was going to finish one while I was gone. I was terrified of not having another, and a newspaper. This weighs more, just what I'm holding in my hand, and this is not really all that I would carry. This weighs more than what I now carry, which is these 3 devices, plus my cell phone. I should say too, while I'm holding this, this is like a, I don't know, $5 or $7 letter sorter that you can get at the office supply stores, and there's lots of different kinds you can get. I got one for Amber and I for our bedside tables. Life-changing. It's quite a distraction here to tell you about this, but the charging cables just lay in these slots, and everything stays charged up and ready to go, and doesn't use up a bunch of space. Now, of course, in addition to traveling with this stuff, I was usually already traveling with a laptop. So what really changed is these 2 devices. And yeah, it seems crazy. Wow, you carried like these 3 electrical things plus your cell phone. Yeah, and like I said, it weighs a lot less than what I was carrying before. Matter of fact, I used to have to carry a big backpack. Now I travel with like a little purse like this. It's a sexy purse. It goes with all my shoes. So what really started changing my reading habits was the first e-ink device I used. My first e-ink device was a Kobo, which is a brilliant device. They've got a great sales platform. Loved my Kobo. I've had a Kindle Paperwhite. This is the Voyage. It is not only the sexiest e-reader I've ever seen. It's one of the sexiest devices I've ever owned. I'll get into more of that in a little bit. But yeah, I carry a separate e-ink device and a tablet. You'll see, even though I think Amazon just said that they were sold like 4 times as many e-readers this year as last Christmas, you'll see people saying that the adoption of e-ink devices is slowing. That's to be expected. I know people still using their original Kindle. I know people who have their Kindle keyboard and they can't live without the keyboard. You don't have to upgrade these things. The technology, the e-ink screen is just amazing. Once you see the Voyage, if you borrow it from a friend or see one in public, you probably will upgrade. It's the first time there's been like a revolutionary step forward. But so what's different about this? Well, I'm going to grab a book as a reference. Let's see. So here's a typical book that I would travel with, big hardback like this. This already weighs more than the 2 reading devices that I carry now. And you can see when I read, I do a lot of this, a lot of dog earing. And I don't usually have a highlighter with me. So I just know that there's something on this page that I want to reference again. And I'll often sit with a book after I finish it and go through all my dog-eared pages and read each page and look for the thing that I was interested in and maybe make notes somewhere else. Or just reading it a second or third time will hammer it home. So I've always, when I started reading on an e-reader, I read a lot of fiction because you read it once and you forget about it. I mostly read nonfiction, which is why my transition into being a digital reader was quite slow. I never thought I would be able to read nonfiction and make notes or make references the way I could with physical books. I don't know which version of this Kindle, I think a lot of these e-readers do this now, change this. But so now when I'm reading, and I do this all the time, I mean dozens of times for each book, and I read something that I want to highlight, it's as easy as dragging your finger on it and clicking highlight. Or I can add a note like writing in the margins, or I can share it. I never really use these two. I always use this highlight button. And when there's more options too, but what that highlight button does is it takes that scrap of text and adds it to a document that is accessible on your device and also online on through a web browser on in your Amazon dashboard, and you can see all of your notes. And each one has a perfect bibliographic entry for what book it was in, the location, the author, everything like that. So now all my notes show up in one place. I don't have to go through all my books and try to figure out what I highlighted. It's all saved for me. That's been it's been magical. Another thing, this just came in handy. I was reading Redeployment. It's a great book, but it's takes place in well, back and forth between the United States and Iraq, but it's about life in the military, and there are a lot of little um, initialisms that I had no idea what they meant. You know, a lot of three-letter acronyms and stuff. Being able to just highlight a single word and get a not only a dictionary definition, but the entire Wikipedia entry for that word or that phrase has been life-changing as well. Instead of saying, well, I'll look that up later, I look up everything immediately and learn a lot more about it. So in that way, it's improving my writing as well. But um, so here's how my shopping has changed. And this is really, all of this is painful to say, I have to tell you. The people watching this either already agree with this or disagree with it. I feel both of you. Like, I did not want to give up my books. This has been a necessity of space, a necessity of economics, a necessity of my future getting back onto a boat, which I just, the ballast of my last sailboat was basically books. I can't do that again. We're going to have to travel very lightly. So I've been buying everything on an e-reader, knowing that I'll be able to take my entire library with me. Everywhere I go, I have my e-reader, and every book I've now bought digitally is in my pocket. I regret not now that I've see the advantages and now that I read like this, I regret not changing sooner, because all the books that I bought physically, I'm probably going to end up rebuying some of them digitally just to be able to take them with me. Just like, you know, the albums that I've bought in 5 different formats, the music albums. So the way this has changed my buying, again, this is really painful to say because I was a bookseller and I prided myself on it, but the recommendation algorithms that we get from these companies with all of their reading data and history are far better than book salesmen. And that is, I'm saying that as someone who prides himself on his reading history and his ability to sell books to people and recommend books they're going to love. How have the computers gotten better than this? Well, they've used, it's not a cold, irrational thing. It's actually from the behavior of lots of readers. These online retailers, they know not only what books we read, but how fast we read them, if we finished them, how highly we rated them. You know, I don't know if they use this kind of data, but I would if I was programming this. I would look at, you know, I would know the location of the person who's reading it, and I would know if this is a book that they stayed up past midnight reading more often than their normal reading habits, just to look at or how long each reading session was. And I would use that to tweak how strongly we rate the book in our algorithm. If I knew that as a bookseller, if I have people coming in and saying like, oh my God, I just read The Art of Racing in the Rain, a book that I loved recommending to people, and I stayed up all night reading it. I read it in a single session. I would take that information and I would use that to recommend that book to other readers. And they're doing the same thing with these algorithms. It's humans coming up with these ideas, just like I did as a bookseller, but they're able to do it with millions of data points. So they're really good at it. When I finish a book, it recommends 4 or 5 other books. And here's another just ridiculous advantage reading this way is when I get to the end of a book, not only can I be, you know, in the middle of a meal, in bed at night, traveling on the road, I can grab that recommendation right there. But even better, what I end up usually doing is I grab samples. I'll just click on several books. I'll download samples. So recently I read The Proving Ground. It's a sailing book about the Hobart Sydney race. When I got to the end of that, it recommended several books, and I downloaded the samples. So Fastnet Force 10, which I've already started, and The Billionaire and the Mechanic, which I haven't started yet. So the sample arrives free. It's just like being able to sit down at a Barnes & Noble and read the first few chapters. It costs nothing. I click on that and start reading, it downloads it, I start reading the sample, and when I get to the end, if I want to continue, and I save this in this spot so I can show you. So I get ready to continue, and that's where it says Well, before you go, you have to pay for this. I click buy now for $9.99, and it's going to download the rest of that book. And when it's done, it'll be at my home screen. And also, you can see these recommendations here at the bottom. And a lot of these, you can have great recommendations as a bookseller, but you only have a certain number of books. Books only stay on the bookshelf for 6 months or so. So you might know that there are great books out there for that reader, but you don't have it. You have to order it in. Here, they're always available. And now I go back to home, and it shows that it's new because it just downloaded it. I click on it, and it's right where I left off in the sample. Now I'm ready to keep reading. It's a great book too. So that's this is changing how I read. It's totally increasing the amount that I read. Lots of reasons for that. Not just the instant availability. I know every reader has done this, where you're eating a meal and you have your book and you tuck one side under the plate and you lay a knife across the other side, or have the napkin holder in the restaurant balanced on this side, and you're turning like this and you're getting food on your book, or you're at the beach. There's just so many, or you're laying in bed. I do this a lot too. You're laying in bed, and dog and spouse snuggling with you, and yeah, I'm talking about you. And it's hard to do it all. It's hard to read, turn the pages, not keep someone up with the light and all that. With this, not only is it one-handed operation. Again, I'm not trying to convince anybody to adopt this. I'm explaining why, like a staunch advocate for the physical book, has made this change to all digital reading, and it has been a years-long process, and something I resisted, and something I'm not proud of, but I'm super excited about now that I see all the advantages. So anyway, being able to just read in bed with one hand and be in awkward situations, but also the ability to set this down while I'm having breakfast and just tap with one finger to turn the page, and while I'm cooking, whatever I'm doing, the device can sit right there and read. Huge advantage. So note-taking is better, the availability, the price. I'm spending less money to read more books. It's crazy. Another thing, this is pretty recent. I'm not sure when they changed this, but we just discovered it. We were able to link our accounts, myself and Amber. You can link your account with one other person, and then any book that I buy, she can read, and vice versa. And this is huge for us because, and it might sound like, that's, I don't know, as an author, I don't worry about this stuff, but some people freak out that, like, two people are reading it and I only got paid for it once. We did that with our physical books for years. Everyone that I know does this. You buy, Amber would buy a book, read it, and pass it off to me. I would read it and pass it to someone else. I see this as a good thing as an author. I love it when people do that with my books. The way, and this was an Amazon thing to be able to link up on one other person and share the account. They came up with a brilliant way to make sure you don't abuse it. You have to actually share your credit card information with each other. So she and you don't have the information so much as the ability to charge to that credit card. So when Amber buys a book, she buys it with her credit card and it shows up on my device, but she could choose my credit card. And I was confused why they did it like this, and we even looked at each other like, do we trust each other with this? And that's when it hit me why they did this, because otherwise there would be people who probably abuse this system and just share it with a friend. But it's got to be someone. It really is only going to be someone in your family that you trust with that, to have the ability to shop on Amazon with your credit card. So I think it was very smart the way they did that. Super powerful. And the last two books Amber has read are both books that I paid for on my Kindle. I don't have to give her my device. I don't have to offload it, copy it, upload it, do anything like that. It's just, it shows up on her home screen. It's wonderful. So I'm doing all my reading on this. And so here's some more psychology for you. This has been kind of a big revelation for me. I've always thought that, even as a bookseller, I always thought that we confound our love of books with our love of the content of the book, the story, or in nonfiction, the knowledge. I realized this when I was working for a audio video home installer, and we would go to these big mansions and wire up these crazy home theater systems. And we went into there was this one neighborhood up in the mountains of North Carolina, these really big houses, and they all had a library full of like these beautiful hardback, a lot of leather bound books. And I pulled one off of a shelf one day, and the thing was in like Czechoslovakian or Russian or something, and all the books were like that. And when I talked to the builder, the architect, they buy them by the foot and just decorate homes with them. And people don't actually read them; they just have them there to fill their library. Um, and even though I couldn't read this book, I realized that I had some affinity for it because of the shape and the heft. And what I had done is paired my enjoyment of so many books over the years. We've all done this as book lovers. Every time we read a great story, we have an emotional reaction, we learn something new, endorphins are rushing through our brains, and new neuron connections are forming, and we have this same sort of pair bonding that happens between people when they hug and have emotional connections. So just as we feel, joy when we see a picture of a loved one, when we see something shaped like a book, we have that endorphin rush, that feeling of love and attachment that has been developed over the years. So people who love reading become book lovers because that's where they have their reading delivered. But confounding those loves is tricky because what I've found through reading with this device is I now feel the same way towards this thing, which most of you, if you don't read digitally, this is like a piece of plastic, a piece of junk, you hate it. You feel the same way towards this that my non-reading friends feel towards books, where they see a book and they just feel revulsion. They remember hating books. We can't imagine feeling the way they feel about books. We see books and we love them. They see books and they think of how much they hated school, and they, really physical revulsion some people feel towards books. And there are some people who feel the same way towards this and not believe or understand that I could feel towards this the same thrill of discovery and excitement for stories and nonfiction that I felt for books over the years. And it took years to develop that attachment. It took reading great stories, having emotional reactions, learning incredible new brilliant things all through something shaped like this. And now that attachment has been transferred. It's a psychological effect. It explains our attachment to books. It explains how we can get attached to these. I never understood when even as someone making a living selling ebooks to people who love their Kindles, I saw in forums and in reviews how much people loved their Kindles. I never understood that. And a lot of people won't understand that with me saying it now. Just like people don't understand how you feel about books and how much you love books. But it's just what happens. It's the story. It's the knowledge. It's the words that we love. And we confabulate that love for the delivery mechanism. So that's why digital adoption has a long way to go. All these reasons are why digital adoption has a long way to go. People are going to feel the same way about these as they feel about their physical books. And we already see that with cell phones, when people feel naked without them because their cell phones have become, representative of their connections with their friends and their people. I think I have an uncle, no, I'm sorry, a brother-in-law whose daughter is my niece, now old enough to drive and is not really interested in getting her license. And we talked about this, and I'd seen it written somewhere else that cars are no longer the symbol of freedom that they were when we were kids. Your car keys, they used to have that feeling. Just holding my car keys when I was 16, even 15, was like, wow, this is power. That was how I was going to connect with my friends. Now people feel the same way about their cell phones. We transferred that same emotional reaction, which is freedom, connectivity, liberation, having the ability to get away from our parents. That now happens in a small screen rather than on a country road. So these things do change over time. As digital natives get older, they're going to find this transition even easier. They won't carry books for status. They'll be thinking about their own homes, their own costs, their own reading habits, and we're going to see digital adoption continue to climb. Um, so why do I carry a tablet? I certainly don't. I don't do anything. I'm just reading on it basically. It's still a reading device, but the reason I carry a tablet is because, like I showed you earlier, the stuff that I travel with, newspapers, magazines, um, for periodicals, there's no substitute. It's crazy. And again, talking about that um, physical effect that we have on our delivery mechanism. Every morning I used to wake up, and the first thing I thought about every morning when I woke up was the newspaper is sitting on my driveway. It was like Christmas morning every morning. And I would go out, I mean, oftentimes in my underwear, to grab that newspaper, come back inside, fix some breakfast, and sit down and read the paper. It was the way I started every day. I look forward to it every day. What's crazy is that after trying a free, this Fire came with a Washington Post app that was free, and eventually I'm gonna have to start either paying for that or go back to the New York Times and do their digital subscription. Um, I tried that for a couple of weeks while still getting the newspaper, and just canceled the paper. Amber's loved it. There's no more stacks of newspapers all over the house. So what's great about, well, so just to finish the thought about that physical, that visceral feeling of now when I wake up in the morning, instead of thinking about the paper on my driveway, I'm thinking about the tablet beside my bed and grabbing it. And now I can eat breakfast, and again, this is flat on the table. I'm able to read the news. It's delivered twice a day, which I love. There's a morning and evening edition, so I can now check the news at night. It makes I'm only 12 hours behind the day's events instead of 24. One thing they really nailed with this, so many advantages to reading the news like this, and again, versus reading it just online, like going to Reuters or the AP or something like that. One thing they nailed is this two-column layout. What's great about this is what I love about reading with the paper is you end up reading things that you might not seek out otherwise. There's always something in your peripheral to read. So while you're reading one story, there's something else kind of begging to be read. And this simulates that. You can go full screen into any of these stories, or the text for me is big enough that I just read it in these columns. What's great is there's video embedded. So if they're discussing a video and you don't have it, you have to go search it online. The video's embedded. All the colors are the photos are in color, which is a huge improvement. Except when they choose to do black and white for aesthetic reasons. But in a lot of these stories, editors at papers have to choose one picture out of 30 to run. Here they'll put in 3 or 4, and then there's a link under this story as an example to see 19 more photos, and then they're scrollable within this this sub window. And if there's a related story, from recently in the paper, you can link to that and read it within the story, and not jump back and forth. The best part is being able to bookmark any story you want and to read for later. So I can just tap this button, and that'll go solid. And now all the stories I've bookmarked are in this tab at the very end. These tabs lay it out like your sections. So you can jump. I used to grab the business section of the New York Times every morning and start with that. And now you can read the top stories of the day, and then you can jump to like business and technology and read those. Huge advantage. So that the ability to bookmark and save for later means I don't have stacks of newspapers to save for later, which Amber loved. It also means I can share these now via email. I can send Amber an article that I think she should read instead of cutting it out and putting it beside her bedside table. I can share it on social media. Huge advantage. So I've canceled my newspaper subscription. I should say, while these things looks pricey, both of these devices paid for themselves almost immediately. Just with the newspaper subscription that I'm saving on this, it's $60, $70 a month that I'm no longer paying in a newspaper subscription. Right now, for 6 months, this is free. And when I have to pay for the digital of this or the New York Times, it's going to be a lot cheaper than what I was paying for the home delivery. The other thing is magazines. I love, my magazine subscriptions. I'm always traveling with magazines, and I have that, again, that reaction I talked about, going to the mailbox and finding a magazine in there. It's like, I know what I'm doing, this Saturday, or I'm going to save this for this flight. I have the same feeling now when magazines show up on my home screen, because they're delivered to you as soon as they're released. It just pops up, and you're like, excellent. It's that same sort of feeling. But it's not just the good ones are not just a PDF replicated on this page. You'll have the stories side, like left to right, but then the story itself is in its own panel, like a web page. It's a much better reading experience rather than at the end continued on page 82 and then flipping back and forth. And again, like with the newspaper, they can embed things that they can't online. So all my periodicals now are on this. I think Wired still sends me the physical magazine, and it ends up just staying in its plastic. So less weight, less cost. I'm getting more reading done. I have the same reaction to these devices as I used to have to the books and newspapers. And for purists, that sounds like treason, but those things were technology as well. They were improvements on prior methods of delivery. So it's the attachment to the words and the information and the stories. That's what I'm in love with. That's what I care about. And even though electronic devices have environmental impact, there's no way the impact is as great as the shipping of these books several times across the country just to get to me or get returned or whatever. So trees are a renewable resource. I don't worry about them, but I do worry about the carbon footprint of shipping books. Even having them delivered to my house is obviated by ordering electrons. So I almost feel like this is a confession of sorts, that this is my new, these are my traveling companions and this is my reading life. But I think it's useful to not just talk about the writing side, but to talk about the reading side and to understand what's going on in the marketplace. We're going to look at that with the next author earnings report with hard data on what we think the ebook adoption rate is, especially for trade fiction. But I think we can augment that data by looking at how people are reading, asking them how they're reading, sharing how we're reading, and just knowing that for someone like me, anyone who knows me, they're probably shocked to see any of this. Their jaws are still open that I'm doing my reading with devices. I was the kid who had my back pocket was stretched out from the mass market paperbacks that were always sticking in them. I read under the table at the dinner table, read under the desk in class. So I've been just a book nut my whole life. If I can not only make this change, but make it reluctantly, and then once I see the advantages, go all in, it's convinced me that there is a huge phenomenon that's already started, that is going to continue to happen, that we've only seen the beginning of. And it's worth knowing, if we're working in this business, that these are some of the advantages of reading like this. It's going to change the way this industry moves in the future. So just one person's confession as a digital immigrant to this strange new land. And I have to say, I like it here.